Call the meeting in order of the Georgetown City Council. Please rise for a moment of silence, and Mr. Lusby will lead us in the pledge.
Shall we pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Lusby?
Here.
Mr. McEwen? Mr. Penn?
Here.
Mrs. Tingle Thames?
Here.
Mr. Showalter?
Here.
Mr. Singer?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. We do have a quorum.
Pass it down.
All the way.
All the way.
Next item of business be approval of our meeting of October 13th. Motion for approval. Ms. Tackett.
Second, Mayor.
Second by Mr. Penn. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. You do have some check register.
Yes.
See a show of hands that you did receive your register. Thank you. Okay, next we have our public comment section. We have 3 people to address the council. Please keep it to 4 minutes. Mr. Quick, you're first.
Evening, Mayor, City Council. Just bringing in our monthly update for Georgetown Main Street. Top of the list, I am officially a Kentuckian now. At the Leadership Scott County Agricultural Day, I was bitten by a horse.
Oh.
So, I believe that's the standard Kentucky initiation process, is that once you're bitten by a horse, you're good to go. I'm also working on a veterans display in downtown with Miss Betty Votaw. We're going to collect framed pictures, preferably from any veterans or families who want to bring in pictures of their veterans, and put them up in the empty storefront for the Lewis Wolf buildings next to Fava's. So we'll be running that through Veterans Day. It'll be a great way to bring some attention to our veterans in our downtown at the same time. Had a lot of fun at Festival of the Horse. I was actually volunteer coordinator for the Colt and Philly review. Trying to get all the vehicles in line and everything, full of kids. There was a lot of running, there was a lot of screaming, and that was just me. Trying to get everybody in order. It was a blast. I don't know how Martha Turlia of Country Peddler managed to do it by herself before, but it's some yeoman's work, and I was glad to have the opportunity to be a part of it. Also worked around downtown, just making sure that any concerns were addressed from our merchants, which there weren't any issues, so very happy with that. Definite sustain for the Festival of the Horse Committee. Let's see. Spoke at the Board of Adjustments for Georgetown College with their plan to relocate some of their historic outbuildings over to Ward Hall, and we're hopeful that after they do a little bit more due diligence, talking to the Kentucky Heritage Council, they'll be able to move forward with that, so that those buildings can be preserved in a more conducive environment with an organization that has the mission for preservation. We're also looking forward to our Spooktacular this Friday from 1 to 5, and we've got everything lined up for that, ready to go. Even had a business that's not even in the downtown asked for permission to come and give out candy. I was like, sure, we'll find you a space. The mayor's office helped us to arrange that out front of City Hall, so more the merrier. If this keeps up, we might have to end up closing Courthouse Square for the event, because I'm not going to turn down any extra candy for kids in the downtown. On one more note, we are going to have to postpone our planned beer and barbecue event. There are some significant legal and liability differences between a wine event and a beer event, which I was unaware of and my board was unaware of previously, and they would just like to have some more time to make sure that all of their concerns are addressed. I also want to give a shout out to Tracy Hoffman, because she went above and beyond answering all of my questions, trying to answer questions for my board as well, so that we could understand all of the differences between the two processes. So thank you very much for that. Questions, comments, issues?
I certainly hope the weather cooperates on Friday for the kids downtown.
Absolutely. I expect all of you to be doing your rain dance in front of City Hall in costume.
Thank you. Ms. Tedder?
My name is Angie Tedder, and I live in the Canewood subdivision, which is now surrounded, or at least a road is going right through the golf course, thanks to politicians. Anyhow, I'm here regarding Steve Price. There was an article written by an anonymous concerned citizen regarding citizen Steve Price. It was in the news graphic on Saturday, October 25th. I doubt this could have been written with any more compassion for another human being than this particular letter. In my heart, this article was extremely touching because it was written with truth and in truth. Steve Price is indeed different. He doesn't approve of my driving a car, but he's never been rude to me. A little over 5 years ago, he was the only citizen who spoke against the increase of alcohol other than Dr. Hambrick, my husband, and me. Steve Price is not a drug user, not a drug dealer, not an alcohol drinker, not a thief, not a convicted felon. I know that he's been cited on misdemeanor charges and court is pending. Steve Price is a highly intelligent human being. You may be laughing at what I'm saying, but then again, you may not have had an actual conversation with him. I don't personally agree with everything Steve Price says or thinks, but I respect his determination and his honesty. My question for you is this. Was the article, which was in the paper, in the Georgetown News Graphic, was the article correct when it stated that Mr. Price's home will be demolished even though taxes on his property have been paid by him? Is it true that the code book of violations are no running water and no electricity? Is it true that personal property can be demolished even if the person is the owner and still has property in the home? Are there any homes in the city of Georgetown which have been abandoned and are used for illicit drug consumption? Have they been demolished? If not, why not? Will the charge of $250 an hour really be a part of Mr. Price's bill to use a backhoe on his property? Have businesses which sponsored prostitution been demolished? I don't know who the concerned citizen is who wrote the article, but I say thank you for your kindness toward another human being. I would like to remind Mayor Varney and this city council that Steve Price is an American citizen. And as I speak, this is still America, and the property which is scheduled to be destroyed is owned by an American citizen who has paid for his home and paid property taxes, as far as I know. There are no children living in this home, thus no child abuse. It's his choice alone not to have heat or air conditioning or anything else that you or I may have. My request is this. Please do not allow this home to be demolished. Find another way for this matter to be resolved without destroying everything this man has. Respect your position. Excuse me for saying this. Respect your position by not bullying. Thank you. And if there's any time at all, can anyone answer if what was written in this article is correct and true?
Quite a bit of it is true. Yes, ma'am. And for the citizens on Rucker, I think they need to be taken into consideration also, because we're talking years into this situation, Ms. Tedder. There's no one up here that does not feel compassion for Mr. Price. Not one.
So it's a done deal, I guess.
I want to add that I have had several people approach me with the prospect of purchasing the home, and I have told them all that we're not closing the door on anyone, but I've told everyone the exact same thing, that they will have to agree to restore the home, to bring it back into code compliance within a certain amount of time, and Mr. Price himself is going to have to agree to certain things. And those are things that I'm not prepared to discuss here in front of the public. But the door is not closed.
No.
It is in his hands at this moment to speak to a willing purchaser and then to come to the table and talk about the things that would have to be agreed upon before that could happen. So
That may be the issue, a willing purchaser. the willing part, because who may want.
I don't
I
know
mean-
that that's an issue. I think that there are people out there who are willing, but there's more than one party to the transaction, and all the parties have to be satisfied.
So you know of people that would be willing to take care of this matter of the house? Or
Absolutely.
You do?
I've had
And he knows.
quite a
it
few
too.
people call me in the past week regarding the property, yes. He knows
Okay.
that as well.
And he knows that as well?
Yes,
he
ma'am.
does.
All right. I'll pay him a visit. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for answering.
Ms. Rutherford?
Can I jump in here just, if I may? I'm sorry. That is something that I don't know if anyone on council knew anything about. I think the last communication that we had was that there was a final date, finally.
There was, and there still is. I have not contacted the demolition company to stop. They are still scheduled to come in here.
We don't want it to happen. We don't want it to happen.
And these are things that have happened. These are developments that have occurred as early as today.
Yeah.
I got some phone calls on Friday, but people have been actively seeking me out. Pretty much the whole day was dedicated to it. I mean, unfortunately, but these are things that are developing last minute. I don't have anything to tell you right now other than I'm waiting on the people who
Showed
would
the
be
interest.
responsible for, who are responsible for making that happen, to come to me and say, I'm willing to sign on the dotted line. So, I mean, that's,
Was the final date was in the morning, correct?
Tomorrow.
no, I thought it was, but the asbestos inspection still has to be done. That is scheduled for tomorrow. That is still going to happen. And then assuming it's a clear inspection, like this company turns it around in one day, then the demolition would start the following day or the day after. They have to be able to work it into their schedule. But yes, it is currently slated to happen very soon. So there is a very small window which Mr. Price needs to take advantage of.
Sorry I was late due to traffic. Which property are we talking about? He has 4.
He has 5, actually, over there.
Which is this?
We're talking about the only one that we've ever been talking about, which is 159, which is the house that he does not live in.
Right.
That he's currently using as a barn, correct?
That he, you know what, I couldn't describe it more accurately. Used as a barn for many, many, many years.
Yeah, you could usually go by there and see the hay bales through the attic windows. I mean, here again, very concerned about Mr. Price, but we also have to be concerned about the people on Rucker. I mean, their property values are down. If I were looking for a home and I found a house on Rucker, I feel pretty sure I would not buy the house because of the surrounding area, and that's just not right to them. And ample time has been given. And if Mr. Price had taken the money that he's spent taking us to court after appeal after appeal after appeal, and spent the rest of his time and money on getting his property in code like we expect everyone else to be in the city limits, then we would not be faced with this situation right now.
I think it's important to remember, too, that the house is a hazard, and it's not just a hazard for Mr. Price. It's a hazard for any kid playing on the street. It's a hazard for any juveniles that might be out snooping in the middle of the night. I mean, there is a hazard there, and we have an obligation to see that that's taken care of.
We do.
The issue to me, and this is the key issue, and I don't want to see someone driven out of their home or a house torn down, that the person is actually living in. But this is a property that he has come into the city and tried to make a farm that seems to produce nothing. That's only purports to be a farm, not an actual farm. At 159, the house and the barn there that he doesn't actually live in. So, you really do have to think of the neighbors on Rucker Avenue, which is a quiet residential street, and is a very tolerant street. I mean, that is one of the nicest streets in Georgetown, in that, it's very laid back, and I know a lot of the residents on the street, and they'll put up with a lot of different things along the street, but I don't think we can ask them to put up with what's gone on at 159 Rucker Avenue for an extended period of time because of the hazard that it gives the street, gives the residents.
There were two main issues there at 159 Rucker, and I think the main issue was the extraordinary amount of stuff that was on the property. I mean, it was almost, that property is 3/4 of an acre, and the whole thing, front to back, was just filled with stuff. And I mean, the stuff was on the property in such a way that animals could live in there, in these piles of things that he say have value, but, you know, and the second issue is that it's way out of code compliance. It has a roof that is full of holes. It's patched together. There are no utilities. There are holes in the exterior of the house that are open to air and to animals. It is completely filled with stuff such that I'm certain that it constituted a fire hazard. Especially with combustibles like hay in it. It was simply in violation of the codes. This is not about depriving someone of their property. This is about bringing a property into code compliance. And I think that as long as we can get those things taken care of, the house can be saved. There are apparently people out there who feel very strongly about Mr. Price and the house who are willing to come forward and take on that burden. And that was the city's demand from the get-go, was that it was apparent that after 10 years that Mr. Price could no longer handle or was not willing to handle it. But if someone, a respected community member, wanted to step up and take possession of the house and to fix it within a very strict time frame, that we would be willing to listen to that proposal. And that's where we are.
And the door is still open to City Hall.
I haven't read the article that was in the paper, but I got a couple phone calls about it and some visits about it. Is there a number of $56,000 or something in that article?
I haven't read it either. It was in the editorial.
That it was costing, they couldn't believe it was costing $56,000 so much for that the city was, and she kind of alluded to it, but that there was costing that much money to go in and clean it up or something. Where would they have gotten a number to use, or what kind of a number? Because we don't know at this point in time a number, do we?
We've got some preliminary numbers. I don't know where that number would have come from, but
Okay.
the numbers that we're going to be talking about are our abatement costs. We've had to remove personal items and put them in secure storage. There's going to be the cost of that storage. You've got the time of the labor that we put into it, and those are the the easy to identify costs. You've also got the cost of years and years and years of litigation that should not be discounted, but the hard costs of going in there and abating over the past 2 weeks, I'm not going to share those numbers right now, but the number 56,000, that doesn't strike a bell with me. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
But somebody throwing out a number of $250 an hour for a backhoe, that's absolutely what it costs to run a backhoe. Absolutely.
Well, somebody was in the shop. I mean, that's where the conversation was. Somebody was in the shop, was upset about the article, and they were like $250,000. They thought was ridiculous to rent a backhoe to do some of the work that was up there. But I told them I didn't know where the number came from or where the number was from. So I told them it'd probably come up in discussion tonight.
Mr. 3.
Good evening. I want to thank Mr. Hartley for answering some of the questions on the ordinance for the appeals board. So I just want to clarify some things because I'm still confused about this. We're going from a 7-member board to a 14-member board for 2 boards, right? 5 each and then 2 alternates on each.
2 alternates.
Okay.
Yeah. But the alternates aren't actually members. They're just alternates.
Well, they serve
Right.
if a member can't come. And the appeals board, the administrative board is going to hear appeals from code enforcement for the city and county and the city fire chief, right?
and the G Squad on the illicit discharge.
Okay. And then the Building Inspection Appeals Board would hear appeals from the building inspector for the city and county only as it relates to the construction of a building? And then-
Building permits, correct.
Okay,
I
and
mean,
nothing about the
remodeling,
electrical.
new permits, not electrical,
Okay.
correct.
And then I guess it was a little confusing, my question, but what are the qualifications? Because the statute just says technically qualified professional experience.
I think
So,
the words are in the building industry. And that to me means you're either a
Contractor.
builder, a contractor, an electrician, plumber, an architect, an engineer.
so an electrician would be sitting on this building appeals board?
Sure,
Okay,
sure. That's
But they're not gonna
exactly
hear
the
any-
type of person that would sit on that type of board, yeah.
okay. And then on the state statute, it says local governments which are enforcing the uniform state building code may cooperate with each other to provide local appeals boards and adhere to the provisions of KRS Chapter 65 when entering into such agreements. Then I was a little confused because then I looked up about electrical appeals boards and do we have one here at the city and/or county? Because I guess I'm making reference back to your conversation with Mr. Lesby and Mr. Williams about if it's in the city, then the mayor appoints. If it's the county administered, then the county is going to appoint. But then in section 4182, Appeals Board, it says there is created a board to be known as the Appeals Board of Electricians. This is city code. And then it says the mayor shall be, or the board shall be composed of 3 members appointed by the mayor and approved by the council, each of whom shall be qualified in elected appeal. Then, the next paragraph, it says, in the event an ordinance substantially similar to this one is adopted by the Scott Fiscal Court for Scott, in which an appeals board is established, the board described in this section shall be a joint board serving the city and county. And it tells you what they should consist of, which is a division fire and emergency official, electrical contractor, consulting electrical engineer or architect, and a utility official to be jointly appointed by the mayor and judge executive. So I'm just kind of confused as to who.
I thought that board was the board of electricians, not the board of electrical appeals. And that board is the board that sets the qualifications for electricians in the city and county, rather than hearing appeals of those entities.
So this is an appeals board if you are denied a license locally? Is that what that is?
I think that's correct. Now,
Okay, 'cause-
I could be mistaken about that, but that's my understanding of the only other reference to electricians in the code is this electricians board, and it's more of a professional standards type board.
Okay. I think.
They meet to set local electrical ordinances too.
Right. So they don't actually hear, they would not hear appeals of decisions of the electrical inspection department. Currently, my understanding is that would be done by the existing or not existing appeals board. But it's just what we're trying to fix. But I believe that board is of a completely different purpose.
Okay. So it's not, it's just of the licensing
Yeah.
part. Okay. And
Oh.
so,
And if it isn't, we'll fix that. But that's my understanding.
okay, well, I'm just kind of confused with the different boards and stuff, because it just seems like you need one board, and I know all this comes back to the interlocal agreements because of the way they're split up, but it just makes sense to me to have one board with professionals on it that make decisions for the city and county. And you can have 5 people instead of trying to round up 14 people.
If it wasn't for the heightened standards that exist for the building inspection board, we wouldn't be having this issue. What it does is it says we want only top, experts on this board, and that presents a problem when the board is also hearing things that can be heard by lesser
Right,
qualified
I understand the
laymen.
difference between
So-
the
They,
two.
they
yeah.
just don't want to come down and give their time on someone who's coming, making an appeals on tall grass.
Right.
You know.
I don't blame them for that.
That's the reason we've had
They don't
to
get paid
split
for it,
up
so.
and have two different boards.
Okay. And then the other thing is the commercial garbage franchise and the clerks, or it'd be amended to include the city clerk to audit the business records. It's the same as my previous concern, just mixing appointed and elected duties. And my other question was, city clerk issues those license, I guess, and collects the money, and now she's gonna audit.
There is no license issued.
So you just collect fees, that's all. So you've got a person collecting the fees, and you're gonna have a person auditing the books. And it referred to the Revenue Commission in the ordinance currently, but it seems like you would want a separate entity, just so that there would be separation of duties.
And in all fairness, that's how the Revenue Commission operates net profits. They collect it and they audit it. And the reason that we want to switch it from Revenue Commission is because they don't collect the garbage franchise. The city clerk does. And there's an issue with when the Revenue Commission collects when they collect information that is of a business nature, they are really prohibited from sharing that with someone like the city clerk. And it's difficult for them to separate that responsibility out when they're getting that information in an audit, say, for franchise fee. We were just talking about this earlier today. There's this golden triangle, and companies like water companies or electric companies or garbage companies don't pay a net profits when they pay a franchise fee. So the idea is to maintain that separation between what's done by revenue and what's done by the city clerk. And we've been talking about adding that language in for some time now because there's a lot of folks who aren't complying. I get what you're saying, but I think that the circumstances dictate that it be done that way.
Well, this says, or the city revenue commission, so should that come out?
I think
if
it's
they
fine to leave it
don't?
in there, just in case. It never hurts to have a backup, but I don't think it's as easy for them to do it and to be able to share it with the people it needs to be shared with.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have a couple of proclamations. We want to draw attention to our SCAD program.
Joint proclamation, auspices of the mayor, city of Georgetown, and the judge executive, Scott County. Whereas Scott Countyans Against Drugs, Inc., SCAD, has celebrated National Red Ribbon Week since the beginning of 1988, and whereas the red ribbon has touched the lives of millions of people around the world, the event marks the anniversary of the death of Enrique Camarena, the Drug Enforcement Administration agent who was murdered by drug traffickers in Mexico. And whereas Enrique spent his life dedicated to making a visible effort to eradicate illegal drugs from our communities, in response to his death, angered parents and communities across the country began wearing red ribbons as a symbol of their commitment to raise awareness of the killing and destruction caused by drugs in America. And whereas today the red ribbon is worn to symbolize Enrique's belief that one person can make a difference and that together we can give the greatest gift to the future of our community, drug-free youth. Therefore, let it be known that we, George Lesby, Scott County Judge Exec, and Executive Everett Varney, Mayor of the City of Georgetown, do hereby proclaim October 23rd through the 31st, 2014 as National Red Ribbon Celebration Week, and urge everyone to join with SCAD, the Scott County school system, and the community in nurturing the full potential of all youth. Wear a red ribbon to celebrate health, drug-free lifestyles, and to remember a person who in life and death made a difference in the fight for drug communities.
Okay, Judge and I met with a group from SCAD to sign this joint proclamation last week. Okay, next proclamation for the Extra Mile Day for volunteers. And again, I've said so many times, this city would not be able to operate if we didn't have the great volunteers here that we do have. So draw a little attention to
Whereas Georgetown, Kentucky is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas Georgetown, Kentucky is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas Georgetown, Kentucky is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas Georgetown, Kentucky acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 500 extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2014. Now, therefore, I, Everett Barney, Mayor of Georgetown, Kentucky, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2014 to be Extra Mile Day. I urge each individual in the community to take time on this day to do only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge all those who are inspirational in their efforts and commitment to make their organizations, families, community, country, or world a better place. This day, October 27th, 2014.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Human Resources, a couple municipal orders. First one is approving the care here. Have any, we don't need to read these, do we? Council has had these. Do you have any question on these? All have a motion?
What's the, on the partially self-insured, what's the is the stopgap, just to make it clear, you covered this last meeting. The stopgap insurance is on the individual exposures, right? I mean, it's.
We have individual specific stop loss on each employee of $75,000. So if, for example, you were on our insurance and you had a catastrophic event and your claim reached $75,000, then we're insured for anything above that $75,000. We'll pay the first $75,000.
And we don't have any reinsurance outside of that for the entire pool. We just do it on an individual.
We will also have aggregate stop loss insurance, which covers the entire group at $1 million.
Okay.
So when we go above $1 million as a group, then we're fully insured after.
Who do we get the reinsurance with?
We're not exactly sure yet. They quoted it with, I think it was Assurance in Tennessee. And if that ends up to be the best quote, remain the best quote, then that's who we'll go with. But he is going to, as soon as this agreement is reached, and you guys vote on it, he's going to quote it elsewhere too.
Okay.
So it could get a little better, but if not, we'll just go with the one that we have here.
All right.
Motion, Mayor.
Had a motion, it
I'll
could be a
second.
second.
Yeah, which one are we motioning for? Because we're talking about two different things.
Care.
For
The clinic?
for the clinic, okay.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Yeah, our next one is municipal order for approval of becoming partially self-insured.
So I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
On the self-insured, actually, when I was mayor, we looked at this. We couldn't do it then because we didn't have the extra money to cover in case the catastrophic thing happened on that. So, if you're planning, how much do you think that we're going to save this coming year on the health insurance by doing this, if all goes well?
Right. Well, we could fall somewhere in between, grab that sheet out again. We could fall somewhere in between saving $354,326 or it costing us $11,575. That's the window we have.
Okay.
Of course, we expect to do much better than hitting that worst case scenario. If you use our past performance to predict our future, then we've been doing quite well.
Okay. And this last year, what have we saved on? Did we not save on the insurance this last year?
We did. Right now, the contingent premium report shows that we stand to keep about $162,000 out of the $210,000 that we set aside for contingent premium.
162.
Yeah.
And then, Megan, there was another number that you could add on top of that as well.
Yes, we budgeted for a 10% increase in the medical cost this year that we will not experience no matter which plan you decide to go with, and that was $155,597.
How'd you get to the worst case? Did you just max out everybody's catastrophic?
The worst case scenario, yes. We looked at if we remain with a contingent premium, then we are responsible for 102% of the cost. So we looked at what the renewal was for, and that was roughly $2,201,226. So if you add the 12% to that, that's the worst case scenario we could have experienced this past year or this upcoming year if you stay on that plan. And then what we did to find the best case scenario was take that number away from the potential savings that we could have.
So no matter what happens, let's say, heaven forbid, that we have a couple of employees that have to go through cancer and maybe a couple that have some transplants. I think that has happened in the past. So the maximum above what we're budgeting is, you're telling us, is 11,000?
The maximum above what we were paying last year could be $11,575. We're budgeted well in excess of that.
Okay.
Darn good odds. Take them at Keeneland.
Pretty good odds. I mean, they seem great. Now, obviously, insurance companies will make you aware that they predict you could have a bad year at least once every 4 to 5 years. So those times could come, but as I said last meeting, the plan is to take anything that we save from this plan and set it aside and keep it away from being spent in any form or fashion so that we are ready for the bad year.
I'm glad you said that, because that's actually would make me really comfortable if we did that, because after a couple of years of doing that, you're going to have enough, regardless what happens, the worst of the worst, you're going to have enough money set aside for that. I would like to see maybe the council do that in the form of either doing it in a formal, not just saying that the administration will, but formally say that that money that's saved on the health insurance should be set aside into a fund for a rainy day fund for the insurance, and if not used after so many years, then it can be put back into the general fund or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see.
Stacy nodding her head too. It sounds like it's not.
I would like to see, Andrew, you can put it up in your legal terms, but I'd like to see it put into some kind of formal document for the council to support that.
I also want to see, kind of piggyback on what Karen said, the overall plan of what we're going to do. I mean, is this mainly for savings, or is this to stabilize the level of benefits? I would hope to stabilize the
We're
level
not
of benefits.
losing any benefit.
Yeah, but I mean, down the road, I mean, not only as mayor, but also as a council, that we use this money to stabilize the level of benefits, that we get the savings, we set the savings aside, and we make sure in a down year or a year where we've seen a lot of, I think they call it incidents in the insurance business, or, down year in the economy, that we're not going back to our employees like we've had to in the past and cutting benefits.
That's right.
So I think
Hope
that's,
to be able to pay any loss that we might experience in a future year. We would hope to pay that with the money that we save.
yeah, and to lock that into a lockbox,
Mm-hmm.
to basically assure employees, especially the young employees we've got now, 4 or 5 years down the road with this self-insurance plan, you're going to have the same level of benefits that you're enjoying now,
Yeah,
or at
that's
least
the
we're going to try. That we're going to try.
The goal that the mayor has put before me every year has been try and keep the benefits at the same level or better, and make sure that the cost to the employees does not rise. And we've been able to do that successfully the past 3 years.
She's done really a good job in our medical plans, taking care of our employees.
So I'd like, to piggyback back on that, Karen's.
Andrew, would that be done in a form of an ordinance that's a budget type ordinance, or what form, shape, or fashion?
Stacy, would it be an increase in?
It would be, we could potentially certainly set up a separate cash account for that, but it would be, there's a GASB, governmental accounting standard for that, to set up a council-approved reservation of fund balance.
Okay.
And then, of course, we could put it in a separate cash account so that it is purely.
If it only, well, it could be done by municipal order. It might be easier to do it by, we could do it by ordinance, but I think
I'd rather
if
do
it
it by
concerns
I'd rather do it by
council.
ordinance.
We could do it by ordinance.
Did you say?
Great that we keep that in reserve. You never know when something catastrophic is going to happen. A couple of those in one year. Really
Honestly,
hurt.
for the employees too, I think maybe they don't get as involved in the budget and all that as we do, but I think even for them, knowing that if something does happen, that they're still protected, that it's not, their health insurance is not going to drastically change because they're still protected from having things put back too. So I think it's a little extra security for them as well.
We've got to realize, though, the reason that we're able to do this is because our employees have been very saved.
Yes,
They
they
have,
have.
they have made it so we can put this money aside.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
They
using the
have.
clinic in conjunction with this plan is what should give us deeper savings, because when we run our medical costs through the clinic, we get them at a much lower rate than we would in the general market.
Right.
So this is a plan to try and spend a little money to save a whole lot more money.
Stacey, did you say they set this in a separate fund according to Gatsby?
I'm sorry, yes, I said there's two ways we can, number one, set up a separate cash account
Okay.
for it to keep it separate. And then also council would, if we choose to do so by ordinance, however that may be, reserve fund balance. It's GASB, I think it's 54. You all may have heard about that a few years back. It came into being right before I came, but the governmental body has or the option to make reservations, commitments, et cetera, of fund balance. You can restrict it, commit it.
We'd put that in a separate fund, and we'd make that a line item in the budget.
It's not a
wouldn't we?
separate fund, it's just a reservation of your fund balance, and then it could be in a separate cash account so that it is.
That's what I mean. Okay.
So you would have two pieces, Tracy and I could set up a separate cash account, but then you all would formally make the reservation of fund balance so that we know that that cash amount is restricted.
Yeah, we would, yeah, just wanted some sort of line item in the budget on a yearly basis to reflect that money is
Well, it
in
would
a
be one of those
separate
things at the end of each
account.
fiscal year
Yeah.
you would probably do. Or you would make it a policy, and then we can tell you how much it is, because you wouldn't know until the end of the fiscal year how much you had left over, but then that amount would go into it. So there wouldn't necessarily be a budget line item. You wouldn't know.
Would it be, it could also show a deficit in certain years, couldn't it? I mean, if
We would
we
hope not,
started,
unless the first year was
unless
a
we
bad
started
year.
off really bad, but that's my
Yeah,
point.
unless our first year was a bad year, we shouldn't have a deficit.
Okay.
It should keep a cash balance. The hope would be, which is as good as we've been running, that we would have several good years and
Okay.
hopefully build up before hope their catastrophic year would come a few years down the road.
And especially if we go ahead and put the contingent premium savings in that account for the city.
Yes.
We want to use some of it to pay into joining the clinic, but then the rest go ahead and put in that account. So we should already have a balance that could cover that 11,000.
So with that,
So
that way we
wouldn't
could start.
necessarily be a part of your budget planning, but as soon as she got the report from the health insurance, which at this point, December 31st is their year end for insurance, we could come back to you, we saved this much money, let's put it into that account.
Keep it
I'd
aside.
like to make a motion for
Sure, go
approval for going with a partially insured fund.
I'll second that.
Any other comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Good work on that.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, that's
Good job.
fantastic.
Okay. City Attorney, resolution approving quitclaim deeds to Storey Alley. Does everyone know where
Mr.
Storey Alley
Langford,
is?
Would you like to pop up and help us with this?
I'd really like to do that.
I know you would.
Mayor, council,
Welcome.
ask me some questions.
How you doing?
We have,
What are we doing?
we have two parties on either side of the Storey Alley, just a very small area. I think you probably have it in your packet to see what it looks like.
I think so.
It's not in very good state of repair. If we quit claim to these two adjacent parties the way we've described it in the resolution, then they'll be able to maintain it, keep it up, and take care of it. And they've agreed among themselves on who would get what portion. And just east of this, back in 2005, I believe it was, 2005, the alley was quit claim to that adjacent property owner, which now Pat Jewett, Heating and Air, and the roofing company now have. So can't really go through there anyhow. So it's just a matter of cleaning up, putting these people in a position to be able to legally use these two portions they've agreed to accept.
In other words, the portion of the same alley that we're talking about, the city quitclaimed it years ago, and now we're asking to quitclaim the rest of it to two different parties
From that point on to water.
from that point on.
Really a small area, maybe 60 feet, 40 feet, something like
And
that.
how long has it been since that's been it's been a long time since that's been an actual traversable alley, correct? It has been blocked by,
It sure looks like it.
yeah.
Do they have the drawings in their packet?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
we got
It's so small I can hardly make it fit to the pin.
Motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. I'm sorry.
Aye.
No, it's you.
It's me.
Any questions, any other question, any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, sir.
And I'll be getting with you, Mayor, and with Andrew to show you what I have.
Stick around for a minute.
Okay.
Was this next?
Should be next, yeah.
Tiger Way.
Yeah, municipal
Tiger Way.
order accepting Tiger Way as a public street.
I know Mr. Caldwell is here as well. I don't know if
Yes.
you want to let, you want to speak and then let Mr. Caldwell speak. How about that?
Well, it's my understanding from the information I've been able to gather about this particular street, Tiger Way, it shows up on all the engineering surveys as private. We can't find any record anywhere to indicate that it was ever turned over to the city. It becomes an issue when they attempt to close on the purchase of those two tracts that are going to be divided. One's going to be leased, and one's going to be sold. It becomes an issue on title. And what we're trying to do is clear up an issue on title because the purchasers need to know they can go back and forth through that property to load, unload, and do whatever they have to do to be in business. And so far, we've found no indication that it was ever turned over to the city. Looks in good shape. I went out and rode around it the other day. Looks to be in good shape. Personally, it seems to be like something that would benefit all the parties, not just these property owners, but the city.
Absolutely. We have a couple of businesses that are hedging on
Yes.
council action here tonight, and we don't want to lose any new businesses coming to town.
Are we currently maintaining those streets then in terms of asphalt, pothole repair, things like that?
My understanding is that the street was paved about 20 years ago,
Yeah, it's-
and it has not had any street maintenance since then.
Is there anything that needs to be done right now? I know at one time there were some areas in front of Chick-fil-A that maybe they've been repaired now, I don't know. but-
Looks pretty good. I didn't,
Yeah.
quite frankly, notice anything.
Where is it again? Is this behind Cracker Barrel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, is it as you go in though? In
It's
front
as
of
you go in off of,
Cherry Blossom?
Cherry Blossom.
not off of Cherry Blossom.
It's,
Off Outlet Center Drive.
Off Outlet Center Drive.
So it is from there,
Yeah,
right?
it's behind, goes in front of the
It's
hotel.
adjacent to
Mr.
Cracker
Collins,
Barrel's
go
parking.
ahead.
Let me clarify, the street's not in front of Chick-fil-A that we're talking.
Okay.
It starts from Commercial Drive, which used to be Outlet Mall Drive, and runs to the end of my property, which was the Ford dealership.
Okay.
Then the Chick-fil-A starts and goes around. And the first 100 feet of Chick-fil-A's property is actually State Street. It's there.
Yeah, if you're
All
looking
of
at
that-
Cherry Blossom, the part that comes off of Cherry Blossom, there's a little bit that's state road.
Okay.
Then it's private, it kind of does a little candy cane. And then it comes back out down to Outlet Center. And we're talking about the portion starting at Chick-fil-A's property to Outlet Center,
To Outlet
commercial, whatever it is.
Everything that was behind-
Question,
everything that was
it's never
behind
been
Ford to-
Considered by
Yes.
any of us as
Okay.
a private street. And I was as surprised as everybody else when we found this out.
Yeah.
There's no maintenance agreement. On the other part that goes from Chick-fil-A to Ruby Tuesdays, there is a maintenance agreement, and it is considered a private street. But the city has, while they haven't paved the street we're talking about, they have done the snow removal and what have you. We've never done anything with it, really. So all we're wanting to do is clear up the title to the street. I don't own it, it doesn't show on any of my deeds or anything, and,
Actually, there are two motels on the back that front on this road,
Yeah.
and that's in behind Chick-fil-A.
Well,
And then the property that's in question, it also runs behind that property.
But you have,
Fairfield though is immediately behind
Yes,
Chick-fil-A.
yeah, yes, yes.
But you're saying this ends at the property line for the former dealership and Chick-fil-A?
yes.
Yes.
And Robert Sims, who developed all this, he has stated, I don't know where Brent Combs is tonight, but he has stated to Brent and to me and to Tim Haymaker that he turned it over to the city 20-plus years ago. And we don't know whether it just wasn't recorded or adopted. We don't know why either.
Brent,
it's a
Brent had to-
situation that we need to clear up.
Yes.
Brent had to leave, but there are two letters in the packet that I passed down to you all from him. And he did the full research on it. It looks like there's about 8 different plats that cover this. There's a little bit of a conflict, but it looks like there's a pretty clear indication that the developers intended that to be a city street. For one reason or another, after 20 years, it simply wasn't made that way. The second letter from Brent states that it appears, other than the fact that it doesn't have the sidewalks to meet the minimum requirements for now, I'm going to assume that the requirements back then could have even been less. He said that for 20 years it has held up remarkably well. I think he mentioned that there are a few, what did he call them, alligator cracks and some rutting. That's pretty much.
It's totally illogical that this would have been intended to be private street through there with the businesses that front on it. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
When that street was built, there was a barricade at the end of the street, which would be where Chick-fil-A's property begins. And the city removed that barricade. It was into the ground, and it was not a through street. And that was 22 years ago when I bought the property, and it was done somewhere along that time. I don't know why the barricade was removed, because I guess technically if it's not adopted tonight, it would be a private street again. Maybe, I'm not sure.
I'll make a motion to accept it into the
Yes, sir.
city's inventory of streets.
Second by Kelly. Any further comment? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Got that cleared up.
Council.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, first reading of an ordinance regarding the Board of Appeals, sponsored by Ms. Tackett.
An ordinance regarding Code Appeals Board summary. 1, amend Section 4-6 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances to provide an administrative appeals board comprised of 5 members to hear appeals related to enforcement of the property maintenance, nuisance, illicit discharge, and fire safety codes. Establishes terms for members. 2, creates Section 4-7 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances to provide a building inspection appeals board comprised of 5 statutorily qualified members to hear appeals of actions of the building inspector. Establishes terms for members. 3, provides for severability of provisions and an effective date upon passage and publication. Publicly introduced and read for the first time October 27th, 2014.
Okay. First reading of an amendment to the commercial garbage franchise ordinance, and this is sponsored by Mr. Penn.
Summary. Amend Section 19-26 of the Code of Ordinances to add the city clerk as a person authorized to audit the business records of commercial garbage franchisees. Provides for severability of provisions and an effective date upon passage and publication. Publicly introduced and read for the first time October 27th, 2014.
Okay, we'll address these two at a second reading at our next meeting. Municipal order approving a contract for phone audit and refunded services.
I guess that's my cue.
Yeah, you need to explain this.
You should have in your packet, and Stacy, feel free to chime in any minute. You should have in your packet a municipal order regarding a contract with a company called Schooley Mitchell that does phone audits. And we talked, I think in the last meeting, about the need in order to have cost savings on our phone system to identify. We have a very complex and outdated network, a lot of direct internal dial numbers and things like that. We're really confident that we can eliminate a large percentage of those lines, but they have to all be physically traced. It's not just something that he says, okay, get rid of this one, get rid of this one. They all need to be mapped and traced, and I don't think that's ever been done. So what Schooley Mitchell would do would be to come in and do that and to make recommendations that we could adopt. Now, their normal business model is if they give you $1,000 worth of savings and they get 500 of it and we get 500 of it, Well, we know for a fact that there's a lot of savings to be had there. So instead, what we asked them to do was to quote us on a flat hourly rate. Because I think that the savings will far exceed that flat hourly rate. I think it's
$23.80.
$23.80. It's well worth it. They anticipate they'd like to come in here on a second phase where maybe they could identify, based on the number of lines that we keep, a potential savings with a vendor, with the current vendor or with a new vendor. And then also part of that contract is we did agree to a cost savings on any billing corrections that they're able to obtain for us going backwards.
Okay.
It's a great deal. We hope it'll find us massive savings. And
Andrew, quick question for you, if you don't
Sure.
mind. I'm one of the last meetings, Tom Warner was here, and I think the savings was $2,000 to $4,000 per month that we were anticipating.
we hope,
So I mean, this is essentially just a 1 month worth of savings.
if our numbers are right, yeah, we could save that. We could save it in a month.
So that's correct then. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you need.
Yeah. We just wanted you all to be aware. Plus, we're not sure. I mean, this is obviously below the contract amount we would typically bring to you, but we don't know the possibility of what they might find in a refund or a credit. If they find us $20,000 in refunds from our current providers, then we would have to write them a check for $10,000. So
We would.
that's going backwards. Going backwards.
Okay, going back.
So if we get a refund,
Not forward,
refund
backwards.
check, yes, a refund check from one of our current providers.
Yeah.
Once that credit is given to us, then they would invoice us for half of that savings. That's why we asked them to design this contract specifically for us, because there are other companies. Andrew and I met with another telecom audit company. That company couldn't quite get that we didn't want to do the future savings. We don't want to share our future savings with you for 1, 2, or 3 years, because we already know we're going to see savings because we're already switching our internet service. We already know we want to go to VoIP. All we really need help with is how many phone lines do we have? Where are they going? How many can we drop when we go to Time Warner?
And that's a service that we're going to have no matter what, no matter whether they go
Yeah.
through and do the audit.
And they will be
or
third
not.
party. The benefit of having them do it versus having Time Warner or whoever our future provider is doing it is they'll be looking at it for our benefit, not an extra phone line to be on the bill.
About the only other alternative, and I don't think it's as good of as an alternative, is to have the VoIP vendors compete to do a phone audit. But I think that they have an interest in not finding as many lines. You know what I mean?
To
This is
get
an
rid of, yeah.
independent company that has basically, we're contracting with Schooley Mitchell, who is contracting with a local communications company that is coming in to do a technical physical audit, rather than trying to combine that with some kind of cost savings contract, and that to us is crucial.
And like you said, this is step one. If we choose later on to have them help us choose a VoIP system and VoIP provider, then that would be a second contract that we would sign later.
I know a little bit about them, and I think the other cities that they've worked with have been happy with what they've
They
done
came
for
with
them.
good reviews.
Yeah,
So,
Motion?
Sure, make a motion.
Karen Minman.
I'll second.
Second by David. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. This is something that needs to happen. Thank you. Recycling discussion.
Yeah, last week or 2 weeks ago, I think Mr. Brandenburg came before council and asked about the boxes that were at the recycling center.
J.R. Williams.
J.R. Williamson.
Yes.
I think it Brandenburg.
Because
J.R. Brandenburg.
He's the road.
Okay.
It's okay.
That's easy enough.
Very confusing.
Old age, Mark.
Very confusing. It is. J.R. Williamson came before council and talked about the recycling, putting boxes aside at the recycling center. I talked to Linda about it today, and it seemed to be just a kind of a general management decision over how to best effectively manage and efficiently manage that department. And the decision was kind of made that, if you're giving away boxes, they might start to give away other things like, coupons from the circulars and the newspapers that are recycled there, things like that. So, I think it was, at the kind of the direct, the the administration's prerogative in this, like bring it before council if council wants to do anything else on this matter as far as trying to change personnel, or change the handbook to reflect the ability of recycling to set aside these boxes is fine, but as it is right now, it's a violation of the city policy to give away city property, and once something is given to the recycling center, it's city property. So that's where we're at.
I would go one step further and say it's not just a violation of city policy, but I think it's also a violation of state law.
Okay.
State law says that any property that the city owns must be disposed of according to the statute. And the way that we dispose of property at the recycling center is by a contract. Anything that we do outside of that, giving it away, or if we use it ourselves or give it to the county or something like that, that's okay. But giving it away to citizens does not comply with the state law. And I think that the policy is in place for protecting our assets and also protecting us against.
Good one.
Wow. Against dishonest employees, but I think the state law is there because the state wants us to not give away our money. And that's what everything that goes into that recycling center is money.
So, I mean, in other words, it's like we have a surplus policy for old property, unused property. We have a policy here in terms of, the agreements, the open, that are, that we've agreed to, or they're a part of open records that we've agreed to sell these recyclables to various companies by contract, by open public contract. Okay. Fair enough.
The other item he mentioned, and I guess it was the other night at that forum, was something related to the pond there at the detention area at the Bradshaw Farm. Mm-hmm. Any of y'all heard that the other night? Because it was, and I don't know, is there an ongoing issue with that, or have we had any complaints about the
Bradshaw, about
About the dam?
Yeah.
He made a comment here as well.
He's not talking about the water retention on Broadway?
Yeah.
He's not talking about the ponding on Broadway?
No, not the pond.
No, he talked about something about the overflow at the dam or something.
Mr. Bram, or Mr. Williams said he was gonna, I guess, address it with the mayor. But you haven't heard anything about
We haven't had any complaints.
Well, Mayor, he's going to address it Thursday.
All that is associated with the Broadway project.
Right.
Okay.
That is ongoing. Okay. So we stay where we are right now? Is that
Yes.
all right with the council? It's already in the handbook, and this is just something that was brought to our attention, and we'll continue to enforce it the way it is. Okay. Quarterly financial update. See where the money is.
Good evening. You already have this in your packets. There's not a whole lot to talk about in the first quarter, we'll put it that way. Always remember, most of what comes in the month of July and even some of August is always thrown back to the prior year because we do accrual basis accounting. So the first few months of the year when I present this don't look like a whole lot. Our payroll taxes for July and August are up about $15,500 from last year. We're currently hovering at about 15% of our budget collected, which is where we were this time last year, so holding pretty steady. One thing I want to say is don't get anxious about the net profits. Again, those returns come in at different times. So the net profits currently, we're really only about 70,000 behind. Keep in mind, sometimes it depends on when those people file. The months of July and August and September, if there are net profits returns for old years, they get thrown back. But once you get past that point, if someone files a 2010 net profits return in December, at that point we're into the audit and I don't throw that back to prior years. So, you always have old years coming in. I will say at this point we've collected $1,061,000. $1 million of that is already 2 estimated payments from Toyota for next year. So they're continuing to make those estimated payments. Currently stand at about $1.6 million from them for the fiscal year that ended in March of 2014, but we won't know until January what the final number on that is there's an extension on the return. Insurance premium tax, nothing to talk about. All that comes in October. So this is first quarter. So we'll see that in the next quarter's updates. We always run a quarter behind there, again, due to throwing that back. The property tax collections, again, those can fluctuate. If you collected a lot of them last year, we're running at about 1% of our budget collected, but obviously that will be picking up here very shortly. So we'll look at that. And again, alcoholic beverage, at the time that I had done this, we had collected $8,135 so far, but 90% of those returns come in the last day late of the month. So they're not due until October 31st, so they have not come in for the first quarter. So unfortunately, not a lot of exciting things to talk about on the first quarter analysis, but usually by the time you get through the second quarter.
Certainly not a time of gloom either, is it?
So, anyway.
Prospects are good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, GMWSS. Hi, Bob.
Let's take a break now. Okay.
I've got 4 items tonight. First is approval of purchase orders to Dearinger Excavating, Inc. in the amount of $17,624 to decommission pump station number 30, which is at Wellington Way in US 62. These unit prices are based upon their current contract. This is a pump station rehab project line item in our fiscal year 2015 budget, and our board approved this item on October 21st.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next,
Item B.
next is a purchase order to Mission Communications in the amount of $10,277.34 for annual maintenance and support for SCADA for 19 pump stations. This is a sole source item. Our board approved this item October 21st. This is the telemetry and systems control for our outlying pump stations where we don't have an actual line of sight to our tanks. And we have to use a cellular connection to maintain contact with those pump stations.
Motion?
Motion.
We get a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number C.
Approval of a purchase order to Southern Sales, Inc. in the amount of $84,016 for duplex submersible pumps for the Porter Road Pump Station. Sewer connection fees paid by Love's Truck Stop will cover the cost of the pump station upgrade. It's a capital project line item in our fiscal year 2015 budget, and our board approved this item also on October 21st.
When did the Love's Truck Stop get on the sewer?
Well, they haven't built yet.
They haven't built yet.
They will be. They're
Okay.
supposed to break ground in December, if I understand.
Make a motion for approval, Mayor.
Motion?
Second.
Second from Ms. Tackett.
Is this the one is this the one where the McDonald's is?
No, it's in Sadieville.
Sadieville. Oh, I'm
75
sorry.
and US 32.
Oh, okay, I got confused. I thought you were talking about the one at Triport Road. I thought.
That should be a big customer for you, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they use about 10,000 gallons a day, water and sewer, so that's going to be a nice size customer.
They're going to be annexed into the city limits of Sadieville.
Already in the
There are-
city.
there
Yeah, I
is-
mean, but they've already going to be out on that interchange.
Yeah, they annexed
Yeah.
that part of town.
They've got, a lot of ground's been moved down there already.
Yeah, I haven't been up there lately, but okay.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Last item, Bob.
All right, approval of purchase order to Clark Electric Company an amount of $11,276 to repair head house pump number 3 at wastewater treatment plant 1. This is part of our plant equipment replacement budget, and the board approved this item on October 21st.
Motion.
Motion?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, Bob. Chief Bossy.
As you know, our SRT, or Special Response Team, works with the Sheriff's Office. We don't use it very often, but when we do, it's generally a fairly critical incident. Over the weekend, yesterday on Sunday, we had a subject that assaulted a woman, very serious assault. It was a domestic violence situation. He threatened her with an assault rifle. and was still holed up in the cabin or house that he was in. And without that team, and especially without that team working together, because it is sheriffs and the city police, they did just a great job. They were patient, professional, and nobody got hurt. And that's just the way we want those things to end.
How fast did they muster when they got the call, this team, when the team was called in? How fast were they
I
able
think they
to
were on
muster?
scene within 45 minutes. So, and then they were there like 6 or 7 hours. And that's what I encourage them to do, to take their time, and they negotiated, and at one point they thought they had him coming out.
With Sheriff Hampton yesterday, and he was elated with the outcome. He said the working together could not have been better, and he was very, very pleased. And that's what I like to hear, cooperating.
We have about 17 cars in our fleet that were damaged by the hail. Unbeknownst to us, each of those, we have a $1,000 deductible for each of those cars. So what we're doing is looking at the newest cars that we'll have in the fleet the longest amount of time and trying to minimize our cost. And some of them have like 48 dings in them from that hail.
Wow.
What's it typically, I mean, have you got an estimate on just one vehicle to get the?
Yeah,
the
it's like
dents?
$2,500, somewhere in that range. But now we also are working with these dent guys that maybe we could get some kind of a deal with them to do, like 10 of our cars for. We're looking at probably spending about $6,000 in deductibles out of our maintenance line. And then we thought maybe if we could give that to one of these dent guys and they agree to do, more of our cars, we might get a better deal, so.
Were they all parked in, was this mainly the cars parked there up, there at Quality? Or
Sorry?
were they mainly the cars parked up at Quality, or were they?
No, there were cars mostly the guys had in the driveways at their houses.
Oh, really?
And stuff like that, yeah. We only, really, most of the cars in our lot are the older pole cars.
Boys, it
Probably
could
wouldn't fix
have
them.
been a lot worse. We're just lucky, just damage on cars and stuff.
Thanks, Steve. Council comments. Who you been hearing from?
I got, hearing from, that was Steve Price earlier, but I got a quick question. I tried to meet with Andrew before we came down, but you weren't in when I came up. I have a point of clarification on municipal orders versus ordinances. I know the difference between the two of them, but it kind of, the last week, or last time we were here, I asked that question while we were doing those by municipal order. If we did them before, when we created them by ordinance, aren't we supposed to either get rid of them by ordinance and then create them, the sanitation in particular, I don't think the others actually fit that, but where we did this change in the sanitation workers, we originally did those by ordinance. Aren't we supposed to undo it by ordinance and then do it by municipal order, or?
You talking about the job descriptions?
Yes. Because they're originally done by an ordinance. I thought we had to undo, if you did an ordinance, you could undo it repeal it by an ordinance and then do a municipal order, but you couldn't, if you didn't repeal it by an ordinance, you couldn't do a municipal
You're
order.
probably right.
So
I
is
guess
it-
I wasn't aware that there was that sanitation
Which
ordinance
is-
making it a
Well,
job description. I don't think it's appropriate to have the job descriptions in an ordinance, but I think you're right. I think if you do it by ordinance, you probably need to undo it.
Revoke it by
Well,
I'm not going to say that the municipal order is invalid,
okay.
but you're right. I think if you do it by that way, I think the correct thing to do is to repeal that ordinance
Right.
and do it by municipal order, because
Why do you like, I notice, I mean, and this is just, why do you like municipal, you seem to like municipal
Well,
orders better than ordinances?
an ordinance is supposed to be, to my guidelines, and there really aren't a whole lot in the statute. My guidelines for when you do something that's a municipal order versus an ordinance touches on the public.
Right.
In other words, it gives some kind of notice or obligation or responsibility or right to the citizen. If it only touches on city government, then it's the property of a municipal order. And something that covers city employees' job descriptions is, textbook municipal order.
I think in the past, though, what we have done here, we've always done the job descriptions until, and to be honest with you, I didn't pay attention to it till the other night. For some reason, it hit me the other night with that. We've always done in the past all the job descriptions here about ordinances. And we used to not do the pay scale has to be done by ordinance. We used to not do that, and then we started doing that, which we continue to do that properly. But I think if you'll go back and look on that to see if we need to clean up some of those job descriptions, if they were done by ordinance and we're not doing that, that we need to clean up some of that, if you will check
Okay.
on that.
Do we have any objection to taking all of those and making them municipal orders? I mean, one thing that,
The only advantage I honestly see in having it in a ordinance is that it does give the council the two times to take a look at it.
yeah,
And bring it in front of the council. That's why I kind of like, be honest with you, that's why I like ordinances. They seem to have a little bit more concrete to them, and then it's more time in front of the council and more time in front of the public, because we've even got to the point, we don't even read municipal orders in here anymore for the public to know what we're talking about. So and it's a personal thing, but I like the ordinances better than the municipal orders because of that. It gives the public more education, and it gives us even more time when we do that. But you're right, we could do the internal with municipal orders and it would still be legitimate.
yeah. Well,
Why don't you just look and see
Yeah.
what we need to do,
well,
what's
that-
there?
You bring up an important point because looking through our code of ordinances and our ordinances in general is something that has been on my radar because I'm technically required to do it
Right.
by state statute. I have discovered recently that there are plenty of ordinances that belong in the code that aren't in the code. And when someone like me goes and wants to pull up an ordinance on streetlights and it's not in the code, well, that's a problem. That's a problem for everybody. They shouldn't have to go back to an ordinance from 1989. They should be able to go to the code of ordinances. That's the whole point of having it. So I think there's a whole lot of that kind of change that needs to be looked at, and I'm hoping that maybe I'll get an intern from Georgetown College to come over and read through the whole thing and just start marking it up, and then we'll go through and make that kind of change comprehensively. But to go back to your point,
Right.
yeah, I think that does need to be done.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of if I am correct, and actually there was just something clicking that didn't click right with me, and it bothered me for several days. But if I'm right on the ordinance having to be repealed, technically, municipal order cannot supersede a ordinance. Is that correct?
That's a good question right there. I don't know that I know the answer to that question.
I
think that
like
it
the way
needs
you
to
broke
be.
the two down, as it applies to the public and as it applies to the municipality.
I don't think that the council should make a practice of overriding ordinances with orders. That's a different statement than saying it can't override. I think it shouldn't. Let's go with that. How about that?
I think that's the way it's designed not to, because
Yeah.
it's designed that the ordinance takes precedent, then a municipal order, and then a resolution.
Yeah.
So I would check before we get too far into and see if I'm completely out on left field, and I could be, or if I'm right on that before we get too far down on your. I don't think it applies. I couldn't figure out that it applied to the two positions internal in here, but it may apply to the two that are out there, or the change out to Public Works. But just check and see what you find.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, over on Clay Avenue, they did some, I guess it's the gas company did some repair work on
Play
the street.
everyone going into the middle school.
Yeah, it's up on this upper end coming off the main drag. A couple of the ladies on each side of that, they've had that done for, good gravy, 3 weeks, and the barricade and stuff still out in the middle of the street, and they'd like to know if they can move them. They're in the parking areas where they're at.
Okay.
I mean, they got, all they did was, I guess they dug down and did some work on the gas line and blacktopped on top of it, but it's been done for a month, and they still got the barricades over top where they
Who
worked
has the
at.
barricades there?
Yeah.
Who put the barricades there?
I guess the gas company must have. But they asked me to ask you, since you're the city attorney, if you could take care of it, since Kyle's not here.
Clay Avenue. Barricade.
Right, going to Georgetown Middle.
Yeah, as soon as you turn in off the Broadway,
Yeah, we'll talk to Cal.
on the left.
Just before you get to the cemetery.
Well, yeah,
Alright.
Mark, they want to move.
You can always just go move them off if it's done.
They moved them, and they come back and put them back.
Oh, really? Well, maybe they're not done.
It's blacktop.
We'll talk to Columbia. Is
There
Columbia
you go,
Gas?
Columbia Gas, yeah.
We'll talk to Columbia Gas.
Andrew, or the mayor, on the issue of the Kentucky American and the fire hydrants over on the east end of town, where are we at on that? Have they sent out roving gangs of hoodlums to go pull up hydrants?
No, we have not.
No.
But I think that they are expecting us to debate the issue and bring it back, which I fully intend to do.
All right.
Yes.
Um,
No, we're not taking them out of the ground.
So my resolution of taking over by eminent domain all the water lines on the east end of Georgetown and having them operated by the our own water company can still be on the table.
Sure.
I'll work on
Still be
that.
on the table.
I'll work on that.
Andrew, when we do that, I think, again, we need to look at what the county, how they're handling that situation specifically. And I know I asked about other communities, and I have spoke with somebody at Kentucky American, although I don't recall his name, and how they're handling it and some of these other.
My idea for what we would do is right now the issue is with how poorly it's the trigger for when it switches from private to public is defined. And I think that we can give that trigger very easy, concrete, and objective standards. And I think and it's something that I want to work with the fire department on. We talked about actually earlier today. Instead of having it be, well, this street is dedicated. You can have a street that's 300 feet long with 5 houses on it that doesn't qualify as street dedication when it very clearly serves a public purpose. I think instead it should be based on the ISO standards or whatever it is that dictates the distance from a fire hydrant to houses. And I think you'd say, if there's a fire hydrant on the street and it's serving X number of houses, then it qualifies to be taken over by the city. If it serves one house and the development is still going, then the developer needs to develop further. I think you need a more objective standard. You go back, you pass that as an ordinance, and then you run your streets back through that. Rather than trying to have to swallow the pill of saying, let's take over all these streets. Let's set up the correct standard and see where they shake out.
Okay.
Same thing with
for
streetlights,
business?
isn't it?
What if the carriage house has a fire hydrant? There's an accident in front of the carriage house, It's not exclusive for the carriage house, and that may not be the best example that you want me to use tonight.
I'm on
but-
Georgetown Water.
But that's, not, well, that.
On the carriage
but-
house.
Okay, but anyway, that's an example.
Well, what are you getting at?
I don't know,
with
the Taco Bell area, all that area, there was a big issue around that several years ago.
Okay.
Kentucky American?
I mean, that's how we ended up with some of that property down in there, quite honestly.
But I think the same logic ought to apply. There may be different ISO standards for businesses, but I think the same logic ought to apply as to when the city considers something that is so clearly a public utility, such as a hydrant, to take over responsibility for it. The alternative is, there are really two alternatives. Everything is private and everybody pays for it privately, or everything is public and we pay for it all. And, we're still sort of talking about a little bit of a hybrid system because there is a time period when a developer is putting in a hydrant and it's not doing anything because they had to put the whole street in and a hydrant there and it's not serving anything. Why should the city take that responsibility over? But that's an option. I'm trying to come up with some kind of middle ground that's more clearly definable, and I think we can do it. That'll hopefully satisfy everybody.
Whoa, I don't think you'll ever do that.
Well, what do they say? Please some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I got a grandson playing football that I can make it.
Check now, let's go.
All in favor, aye. We are adjourned.
Is he in the middle school or?
Yeah,
Is it?
JV.
Oh, wow.
They give a sign in front of your.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Kelly has one. Yeah, it's not an easy fix.
It's not easy, and it has to be.
Church, that's where she called up.
How I want to be is up front.